Well, what you do know is that the opposition, unlike the government, right, it's an extraordinary situation. This is the government of the country not telling us what they're going to do on spending. We are going to be telling you what we think they ought to do now and what we would do in office.
Well, they had that chance to be grilled last week.
I think
we're now on to you guys.
Yes, absolutely.
And it just seems to me that, you know, you are saying to the country, you're getting the benefit, if you like, of the rhetoric of talking about tough cuts and responsible decisions and seriousness and the deficit, but you won't take responsibility for the human consequences of what you are going to have to do.
But we'll take all the consequences of the decisions that we'll set out this week. And I think that is, you know, that is the contrast here is normally in politics, oppositions just try and glide through and leave the difficult choices to the government.
But you're not talking about the difficult choices,
we've said,
really.
with the first opposition in 30 or 40 years that said we have to cut public spending, the first opposition that's actually identified things that need to be cut, things like the identity card scheme, and we will be the first opposition in a very long time that actually outlines some specific reductions, not that would solve the problem, but that would start to get to grips with the problem and make progress.
And higher unemployment is a price worth paying for that?
Absolutely not. I don't accept the premise of your question at all.
You don't think unemployment is going to go up as a result of what you're doing?
Our plans are about getting people back to work. That is what tomorrow's announcement is going to be all about. And let me just say this.
It just seems to me it's going to be swamped by the number of people going to be losing their jobs on the other side.
I think if you take that approach, then all you can do is put your head in the sand and say there's nothing we can do about this deficit. And if you do that, unemployment will be higher. If we don't address this deficit, we will be facing very serious economic consequences in Britain. Go back in your history and ask yourself, what was the only government that actually cut the National Health Service? It was the Labour government in the 1970s, because they'd run out of money, because they didn't address the deficit. By doing this, by taking the difficult steps, by taking the country with us through these difficult steps, we can avoid that from happening.
We've talked about spending. Let's talk about tax. Isn't it completely absurd, in the situation which you find yourself in, to maintain your promise on inheritance tax, touching a tiny number of very rich people at the top? Wouldn't the straightforward thing now be to remove that from the table?
Well, what we've said is that this is a pledge that we'd like to deliver, because it's something we promised, that only millionaires should pay inheritance tax, everyone else should be exempt from it. The only reason we were able to make that pledge, and the only reason we're able to keep that pledge, is we found a group of relatively well-off people to pay for it. And that is the non-dom residents, people who live in this country but don't pay tax on their worldwide income, who we are going to charge and tax to deliver this promise. Now, we said very specifically,
but of all the priorities, all the people there worrying about how to get through the week and pay their bills, that remains one of your priorities.
Well, as I say, only because we found a group of people that can pay for it, and also because we've said this is, and George has said this very clearly, it is a pledge for a parliament, and I think it is right. People want to know...
Could it slip beyond the first parliament?
It's something we want to do.
You're definitely going to do it.
As I said, because we've identified the people that can pay for it, we are able to maintain the pledge. And
what about the 50p rate of tax? Because
that's something we've said we can't make an early pledge to get rid of. We don't like it. We don't think it's the right approach. I think it sends a signal that Britain is now anti-enterprise, anti-wealth creation. I think that's a bad thing. But we can't make an early pledge to get rid of it.
The Institute of Fiscal Studies suggests it won't bring in any money, or not much.
Well, I've seen lots of different estimates. There's a debate going on about how much money it raises. I think it's clear it will raise some money, at least in the short term, and that's why we can't make an early pledge to get rid of it.
Aren't you going to have to raise taxes generally, even beyond where they are, to fill this gap?
This goes back 4 years from when I became leader of the party. Right from the start, I always said you cannot rule out tax rises, you cannot make uncosted pledges about tax, and I won't do that.
VAT?
And we're right not to rule out tax pledges.
VAT, perhaps?
Well, what I want to do is try to make sure that reductions in spending bear the brunt of dealing with the deficit. I think we are already an overtaxed country. I think of people going to work on relatively modest incomes, struggling to pay struggling to pay the bills. They want to see us get our house in order, to get spending down. They do not want to have to pay more taxes. That's why we're putting the emphasis on spending.
A lot of people don't understand quite who you are and quite what you stand for, even now. And when they hear you talking about tax and hear you talking about jobs and so on, they make the criticism that basically you are a very, very rich man, you're a wealthy man, and you're a toff, and you don't really understand the people out there.
Well, I've had 4 years of doing this job as Leader of the Opposition, when I've tried to explain what I believe in, what I want the Conservative Party to do, I think people can see now a pretty clear line from me and from the Conservatives about what matters to us, about the importance of the National Health Service, about the importance of families, about the importance of the environment, about how we can make this not just a stronger country economically, but also a stronger country socially. And, you know, I mean, I think it's right. People ask all sorts of questions about your life, your background, your family, and I'm very happy about that.
There's a picture, I think, that you always wince at.
Yeah, right, I do, yes.
The Bullingdon Club. Of course. Do you really, I mean, is that the real David Cameron?
No, we do things when we're young that we deeply regret.
And you're embarrassed about that?
Of course, desperately, yeah, very embarrassed about it. But I think people have had over the last 4 years a chance to get to know what I want to do with the Conservative Party, what I want to do with the country, and get to know me as well. Okay. But there'll always be questions.
As they're getting, here's a question that will always be asked, and I think it's a fair question. What's the personal wealth of yourself and your wife? What are you worth?
Well, we own a house in London, which is a nice house off near Ladbroke Grove.
But in terms of the assets and the money that you're going to inherit in the family?
I'm trying to explain. So we own that. We own a house in the constituency, which is quite highly mortgaged. We both earn good salaries, so we're definitely a well-off family.
30 million or so, the Sunday Times suggested.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Is it?
Absolutely ridiculous.
So what is the real figure, would you say? If 30 million's wrong, what is the real figure?
I think what actually matters is, do you understand the problems people face in this country? Do you understand the challenges we face as a country? Do you have the right ideas to deal with them? That is what people are asking about.
So you won't tell me what you're worth?
Well, you're very happy. You want to come and you can look through all my bank statements. I'm very happy.
No, but you must know. You must know in broad terms. People know what they are worth.
Well, how much? No, house prices change all the time. As I say, our main asset is the house that we own in London, and you can come and have it. We've done an interview in it.
All right.
Okay. But I don't actually think
Prime Minister made one point about you, which seems to be fair, which he said that you complained bitterly about the way the financial crisis was run, but all the way through the crucial years, you were calling for less regulation. You were calling for government to stand aside. In terms of bad calls, that was about as bad as it gets, wasn't it?
Well, I don't accept that, because I think the big mistake...
well, I mean, as you can probably guess, I've got all the quotes here, and they're pretty strong.
The point about regulation,
I think... Can I just read you what you said, then, back in 2006. You said that too often regulation is the first resort. The message from the city is that we should have less regulation, and that the centre-right believes that people should stand aside and let business get on with it. You know, your deregulation task force said government claims that all this regulation is necessary. They seem to believe that without it, banks could steal our money. Well, they did.
I think the point of what happened is actually there was a huge amount of regulation taking place, but there was a complete lack of authority. Why was there a lack of authority? Because Gordon Brown had taken away from the Bank of England the responsibility for being that authority. There was no one in Britain to call time on debt, to call time on lending. And that is the big thing that we would change. Gordon Brown is saying, keep the tripartite system, keep the regulatory system as it is. We are saying, no, change it, put the Bank of England back in charge. And it's a really important point, this, because it's not about the quantity of regulation, it's about having an authoritative figure, a respected institution at the heart.
But you did get it wrong, I think.
No, I think on the Bank of England we got it right.
Well, okay. Gordon Brown has said, apparently, that he is prepared to go head-to-head in television debates. But they'd like those debates to start now. In effect, the great conversation, the great national argument is happening now, and he'd like to get on with it. Will you pick up that challenge?
Yes, I'd be delighted. I mean, I've been I asked Gordon Brown first, I think back in, I think it was May 2007, over 2 years ago, challenged him to TV debates. I think they're a good idea. I think they will help enliven interest in our politics. So yes, I'd be delighted to take part in television debates. Obviously, we've got to get some of the rules straight, and also we've got to have them during the election.
But not now?
Oh, both. I'm happy.
Fine. We've got that clear. David Cameron, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this sunny day. Back to London now with the news headlines. Louise Minchin.